Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I think you already my name. I told my name so many times, so welcome again. Good afternoon, my name is Eun-sik Park. I'm a Director General of International Affairs Bureau of the Korea Forest Service. And I am also working for the World Forest Congress Secretariat as Secretary General. It is my great honor to moderate the closing ceremony of the 15th World Forestry Congress. I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to all the honorable ministers, vice ministers, and head of international organizations and Congress participants that had attended this closing ceremony. Another special thanks is due to our partner in facilitating the Congress, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organizations, and to all members of the Korea Forest Service. I think this is my last chance to take the floor, so I'd like to say some thank you to my colleagues. My team within the World Forest Congress Secretariat and the Korea Forest Service International Affairs Bureau, we have persevered 2 years of the preparations in the COVID-19 pandemic, overcoming challenge after challenge that was put in our path. We have truly come out as winners in showing the future generation that we can find the breakthrough in any situation when we are united. Before I start, I'd like to share some of my feeling as the Secretary General of this World Forest Congress. Despite the challenging circumstance of the COVID-19 pandemic, the support and contribution demonstrated by all participating countries and groups was truly overwhelming. These concerted efforts have enabled us to produce meaningful outcomes throughout the past 6 days. Now, the Congress outcome will be announced. May I invite Associate Secretary General of the 15th World Forest Congress Secretariat, Mr. Peter Chokar, to announce the outcomes. Please, my dear colleagues, Peter.
Your Royal Highness, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, friends, and last but not least, my good friend over the last 2 years, Dr. Eun-sik Park. Thank you very much for all the preparations, and thank you very much for the opportunity to present the outcomes of the 15th World Forestry Congress to this esteemed gathering here. I would like to inform you, as it has been partly announced in the morning during plenary 4, that the outcome of the Congress is expected to be composed of several components. One is what we discussed in plenary 4, the detailed action proposals following the logic of the 6 sub-themes of the Congress, and this is what we observed and discussed in a very lively session in the morning, and these in an advanced unedited form, taking into consideration, of course, also the comments that were made in the morning, will be posted on the FAO website, and we continue working on them to give a final format to it and make sure that the language is perfect indeed. The other part of the outcome is a very important document. One is the key outcomes of this Congress, the ministerial call for scaling up sustainable wood-based pathways, which was endorsed by ministers of Austria, Cameroon, Gabon, Japan, Peru, and the Republic of Korea. And the next component of the outcome package is the youth call for action, which will be presented later in this session by our good friend who coordinated this process throughout the last several months, Mr. Amos Amanubo. And lastly, the piece that tries to provide an umbrella for all these outcomes is the Seoul Forest Declaration, which I have the pleasure to present it to you. And before I'm doing that, I would like to make a personal comment. My observation of this World Forestry Congress is that it was able to generate a very powerful, strong message that is in addition that we used to talk about in relation to forest. We are talking about sustainability, we are talking about longevity, we are talking about the global ecosystem very often, but hardly ever with such a strong emphasis we recognize an additional natural resource that is often unrecognized, and this is time. Often we believe that time is infinite. It is true, time is infinite, but not for us. We don't have an awful lot of time to take the right things, to do the right things, to take the right actions. And this time is more and more finite, day after day. And I was very happy to see this message or hear this message coming from the several discussions that we need to take action now. Indeed, it is now because, yes, there is tomorrow and maybe day after tomorrow, but we don't know how many. And what we can do now, we must do today, because that's what is done is done. What is not, it may happen or may not happen. And then this is what everybody suggested here, that we have a lot of wisdom, we have enough knowledge, so let's go and apply it. Let's go and work, and let's end the talk and start walking the walk. And this is something that I believe is one very important message of this Congress that can be carried forward into the future. And with this introduction, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read out to you the Seoul Declaration. We, the participants from over 140 countries, gathered in person or online at the 15th World Forestry Congress in Seoul, the Republic of Korea, between 2 to 6 May 2022, assert that forests, forestry, and forest stakeholders offer major nature-based solutions to climate change, biodiversity loss, land degradation, hunger and poverty, but we need to act now. There is no time to lose. We convey the following urgent messages to encourage action for a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests as a contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and the green recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. Forests transcend political, social, and environmental boundaries and are vital for biodiversity and the carbon, water, and energy cycles at a planetary scale. The responsibility over forests should be shared and integrated across institutions, sectors, and stakeholders in order to achieve a sustainable future. Vast areas of degraded land require restoration. Investment in forest and landscape restoration globally must be at least tripled by 2030 to implement global commitments and meet internationally agreed goals and targets. There is no healthy economy on an unhealthy planet. Production and consumption need to be sustainable, and policies should foster innovative green financing mechanisms to upscale investment in forest conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. Wood is one of humanity's most ancient raw materials, but can take us into the future as well. It is renewable, recyclable, and incredibly versatile. The full potential of legal, sustainably produced wood must be used to transform the building sector, provide renewable energy and innovative new materials, and move towards the circular bioeconomy and climate neutrality. Forest degradation and destruction have serious negative impacts on human health and well-being. Healthy, productive forests must be maintained to reduce the risk of and improve responsiveness to future pandemics and provide other essential benefits for human, physical, and mental health. Innovative technologies and mechanisms are emerging for the provision of and equitable access to accurate information and knowledge on forests. These must be applied widely to enable evidence-based forest and landscape decision-making and effective forest communication. Forest-based solutions must be inclusive of the perspective of family farmers, smallholders, forest communities, indigenous peoples, women and youth, and respectful of their rights, and they must empower them to participate equitably in decision and making and sustainable forest value chains. Greater investment and capacity building in forest communication and education and more research are needed to strengthen the understanding and awareness of the benefits of sustainably managed forests and trees. Close cooperation among nations is required to address challenges that transcend political boundaries. This was strengthened at the Congress by new partnerships, such as the Assuring the Future of Forests with Integrated Risk Management, the so-called AFFIRM mechanism, the Sustaining an Abundance of Forest Ecosystems, SAFE initiative, and the Platform for REDD+ capacity building. The outcomes of this Congress, including this declaration, as well as the Youth Call for Action and the Ministerial Call on Sustainable Wood, should be transmitted to the next conference of the parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, the upcoming conference of the parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, and to all other important forest-related fora. The Congress calls on governments, the private sector, research organizations, educators, communities and youth organizations to take urgent action outlined above in partnership as a means for achieving better future for all. The Congress participants gratefully acknowledge the hospitality of the government and the people of the Republic of Korea and the support of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Associate Secretary General Mr. Peter Chokar, for announcing the Congress outcome. In the past 6 days, we have many opportunities share the very ambitious vision, insightful message, and good experience from many participants, especially from the Her Royal Highness Basma bint Ali and Madam Maria Helena Semedo and the honorable ministers and vice ministers and stakeholders from the many different groups. So I'd like to invite representatives to listen to their voices about the outcomes. The representatives from the stakeholders of the forestry sector will give their remarks. Please stay within the 5 minutes time frame. May I first invite the Deputy Minister of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment of South Africa, Maggie Mahomoto Sotu, to give her remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, Program Directors. And good afternoon to Your Royal Highness, Princess Basma Pint Ali, the Honorable Ministers, Deputy Ministers present here today, FAO Deputy Director General Maria Helena Semelo, good afternoon to you and thanks for the warm welcome on my arrival. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I know I'm given 5 minutes and I won't disappoint you. I will stick to my 5 minutes. It is an honor for me to address you during the closing session of the 15th World Forestry Congress. It has been 7 years since Durban, that is my country in South Africa, and the vision for forest articulated at the 14th World Forestry Congress. We called then for new partnerships among the forest, agriculture, finance, energy, water, and other sectors. The 14th World Forestry Congress concluded with recommendations and Durban declarations. Recommendations focused on the major global challenges such as food insecurity, climate change, water scarcity, poverty, biodiversity loss, and limited resources in the context of growing world population require integrated and cross-sectoral approach. The Durban Declaration is summarized through the call for action and the Vision 2050 for forest. The call for action and Vision for forest focused on issues related to better integration of forest and other land users facing global challenges, a growing and common understanding of the need for more holistic and cross-sectoral approaches, and bold action to move from census to implementation following the powerful vision formulated by youth at the Congress. We are encouraged that the 15th World Forestry Congress was building on the recommendation and the outcomes of the Durban Declaration. I am referring to the engagement and discussions on topics such as forest finance, investment forum sessions that deal with inclusion and transformation, where we all acknowledge and appreciate indigenous knowledge system. In addition, Program Director, it was pleasing to see youth and students in particular participating in the Congress, as they are the future of tomorrow. Program Director, South Africa, having hosted the 14th World Forest Congress in Durban 2015, we are delighted that the organizers of the 15th World Forest have decided on a theme, sub-themes that will ensure continuity in terms of assessing what has been achieved since the last Congress and what needs to be put in place to ensure there is progress going forward. I listened attentively when you were reading your declaration for this specific Congress. I believe that the next Congress will focus and have a look whether we did indeed implement whatever we have decided upon today. I'm honored to announce that in line with the main goals of the Congress, as South Africans, we have a number of initiatives, but I would like to just highlight a few. The implementation of the 10 million trees program over a period of 5 years. The program is aimed at mitigating climate change and creating sustainable settlement. Development and implementation of the agroforestry strategy to address issues of competing land use between forestry and agriculture, food security, and resilience during disasters such as drought. Participation in reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in developing countries. Program Director, let us be inspired by this year's winner of the Wangari Maathai Forest Champion Award, Cecil Njobet, and the many other champions of forest around the world. I need to indicate before I conclude that I had a very fruitful meeting this morning with the Minister of Korea for Forestry Service, and there are some areas of cooperation that we have decided upon as a country with South Korea. Therefore, I'm looking forward to working together with South Korea on those areas that we have identified. The Congress this week has shown we have come a long way since Durban, while we needed to learn to cope with new challenges such as COVID-19 pandemic. We have noted a groundswell interest worldwide in forest and their vital cross-sectoral cross. We have explored the 3 forest pathways towards sustainable development. As I conclude, I would like to thank you for a warm welcome since from the day one up to this day. As South Africa, we're very much pleased to see that most of the issues that we discussed in 2015, they have been implemented by some other countries. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellencies, for your wonderful remarks and for representing South Africa, the host country of the 14th World Forestry Congress. Next, Minister of the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs of the United Kingdom, the Lord Jack Goldsmith, will give his remarks as a representative of the government sector. Please welcome with a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary General, Your Royal Highness, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be asked to say a few words. I'm Zach Goldsmith. I'm a minister with the UK government. And I'd like to thank the UN, FAO, and President Moon, and to everyone who has given me such a warm welcome to this beautiful country. From the Eurasian curlew stopping off at the Suncheon Bay wetlands on a 5,000-kilometer annual migration from Australia to the Arctic, to the cherries, hazel, deer, magnificent black bears deep in the forests and mountains of Jirisan National Park. Your country is simply full of national and natural treasures. Now, it's my first time here, but I have long admired from a distance this country's truly remarkable achievements. Its lands and forests, as you know well, had been flattened by conflict in the middle of the last century, but you would never know that today. Indeed, 2/3 of the Republic of Korea is now covered in canopy, and this is one of the very few nations on Earth that ended the last century with more forest cover than it began. And that wasn't an accident. It didn't just happen. It required huge commitment at every single level of society. And as a result of that incredible effort, I know that protecting and restoring these natural treasures is a source of deep national pride, and rightly so. I've seen that Koreans see their forests as a place of reflection, of worship, learning, fun, and of course, as places of work as well. And that collective determination and commitment, I think, should inspire and encourage all of us. Indeed, with hundreds of thousands of species currently facing extinction, with forests being lost at a rate of around 30 football pitches every single minute, and with the climate being dangerously destabilized partly as a result of that, it is the sort of commitment and ambition that we need all over the world. Now, I'm not going to burden you with the facts and arguments that you undoubtedly already know, other than to say that if we continue to degrade the world's great forests and ecosystems, then we will derail complex natural systems beyond repair, systems on which each and every one of us relies completely. Millions of people will endure terrible suffering, and our shared global goals will simply slip beyond our reach. And reversing these trends is, I believe, the single greatest challenge that we have ever faced as a species. But the good news is that we know that we can turn things around, because demand for change is evident all around us, because we have all the knowledge and all the tools we need in order to turn things around, and because around the world there are pockets of genuine ambition, real leadership. And I've seen that myself. I've been lucky enough in my job to be able to visit some of those ambitious spots, from Costa Rica to Gabon, from the Republic of Congo to here in Korea. And we know that given even half a chance, nature can recover. Indeed, protecting and restoring a natural world provides so many other solutions to so many other challenges we face at the same time. Hunger, poverty, pollution, even pandemics, and the causes and the impacts of climate change. And that's why, as presidents of COP26, which we hosted, as you know, at the end of last year, the UK brought nature from the very margins of the global climate debate, and we put it into the heart of our response and the global response. In Glasgow, 143 countries representing around 90% of the world's forests came together to commit to halting and reversing forest loss by the end of this decade. And that Glasgow Declaration was supplemented, reinforced by unprecedented public, private, and philanthropic investment amounting to around $20 billion, with at least $1.7 billion being allocated to help indigenous people and local communities secure forests and land tenure rights. It's reinforced at the same time by commitments from some of the world's biggest buyers of forest risk commodities, by financial institutions, the big multilateral development banks as well, all committing to align their buying, their portfolios, their policies, not just with the Paris Agreement, but with nature as well. And having doubled our own international climate finance to 11.6 billion in the UK, we are committed to investing around a third of that in nature-based solutions, with about half of that again in forests. So in the months before we hand the baton to our friends in Egypt, who will be hosting COP27, our priority as a country is to ensure that those commitments that were secured are honoured in full and that we build upon them. And this World Forest Congress, with the announcement that you've just heard, absolutely is central towards building upon those commitments. But COP27 is just one landing post this year. We have numerous opportunities to build on the momentum at the CBD COP15 in Kunming, a critically important moment. Before that, the UNCCD COP15 on desertification. And the golden thread that runs through all three Rio conventions is, of course, nature and our relationship with it. And if we want to secure an ambitious post-2020 global biodiversity framework, and if we want to get that agreement over the line in Kunming, then we need to demonstrate a seriousness about closing the very significant funding gap over the course of the next decade. Public money, private money, philanthropic money, all need to be scaled up considerably. But we also need, even more importantly, to change the way that public money is spent across the board, so that instead of undermining the public good, it supports it, shifting hundreds of billions of dollars of subsidies away from destruction and towards sustainability and renewal. If you consider that the top 50 food-producing countries spend nearly $700 billion every year subsidizing often highly destructive land use, that's 4 times the world's aid budget combined. And you need only imagine the impact if that money was shifted away from destruction towards renewal. Now, these are things that only government can do, and too often governments are not doing them. And so we need governments everywhere to commit to using all the levers that are uniquely at their disposal, working together across ministries to adjust the rules, to take nature into account, to make pollution and degradation of the natural world an unbearable financial liability, and to make the market recognize the true value of nature. It's a huge challenge, even as we confront the impacts of pandemic, conflicts, and so on. But we know we can do it. The only thing we really need is political will and political leadership. And so before I close, I just want to add my personal thanks to Minister Chai Byong-am and the Korea Forestry Service for their extraordinary leadership of the World Forestry Congress as we seek to deliver on the promises of the Seoul Forest Declaration. I thank you so much for all of the leadership you've shown over the last few days.
Thank you, Lord Goldsmith, for your remarks. Your words that governments must commit to use their unique political will and leadership was profound. Now I'd like to move on to the private sector. I'd like to invite IUPRO, the International Union of Forest Research Organization, President. Dr. John Perrotta will represent the research sector and give his remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished fellow panelists, delegates, colleagues, and friends. On behalf of UFRO and the forest science community, thank you for this opportunity to reflect on the outcomes of this historic 15th World Forestry Congress. This Congress provided an open forum for the exchange of knowledge, perspectives, and visions about the diverse communities, among the diverse communities that comprise the forest sector, including scientists, educators, forest managers, civil society, youth, policymakers, communicators, and the public. This dialogue has enriched us all and expanded our understanding of how, by working together, we can and will raise the profile of forests and their contributions to many of the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the COVID-19 recovery measures at this critical time. The Congress Declaration presents a clear set of messages regarding the critical roles that forests and trees outside of forests play in enhancing food security and nutrition, providing abundant and clean water, making our cities more livable, halting and reversing land degradation, promoting sustainable production and consumption, and of course, helping to address both the climate and biodiversity crises that threaten our survival. Forest science has a crucial role to play in all this. The vast pool of knowledge, experience, insights, and innovation that is currently available from Western science, indigenous science, and the traditional knowledge of local communities is fundamental to effective conservation, sustainable management, and restoration of the world's forests in the face of the many challenges we face. This priceless knowledge and the social and cultural capital that underpins it must be fully engaged. The forest research community stands ready to work shoulder to shoulder with our colleagues in all natural resource sectors, including agriculture, as well as with policymakers, the private sector, civil society, organizations, communities, and youth to tackle the urgent challenges before us. Our efforts will also require the support and engagement of the public, whose personal and collective decisions have significant direct and indirect impacts on forests and their governance. Therefore, effective communication about the importance of forests is critical. So too is forest education at all levels, from school children to university students to forestry professionals. These priorities are clearly articulated in the Seoul Forest Declaration. In closing, I would like to thank both the Korea Forest Service and FAO for making this amazing Congress possible. I believe that I speak for many of us who have participated both physically and virtually in this very important event, that it has been an inspiring and energizing experience, one that reminds us that by learning and working together, we will succeed to build a greener, healthier, and more resilient future with forests. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. John, for your representing the research sector and speaking upon the role of forests to respond to the climate crisis and the significance of forest science. During the last 6 days, in many sessions, I heard many speakers emphasize the role of indigenous groups. So now I'd like to invite the leader of the coordinator of the indigenous organizations of the Amazon Basin, Juan Carlos Gintihau, to represent the indigenous community. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
BNK Shuarat Campunia Vinyahe, Atumi Mashi Amidmat He.
I have just said hello to my own in my own language. I am Juan Carlos Jintiac, and for me to say hello this afternoon, it is a great honor and privilege. In particular, I would like to take this opportunity to express my appreciation to the Republic of Korea, FAO, and the Korea Forest Service, as well as the ministers, Her Excellency, and Her Royal Highness, as well as brothers and sisters. On behalf of my organization, KOICA, which is an alliance of indigenous groups in the Amazon region, it is indeed a great pleasure for me to greet our brothers and sisters across the globe. The message that I would like to deliver to you comes from the bottom of my heart. We would like to mention that the fact that indigenous groups are included in the Seoul Forestry Declaration is something that we would like to see in paper, because there are many members of the indigenous groups that do not have access to the internet or the computer. By providing paper copies, we would be able to deliver this message to our brothers and sisters in our communities. Of course, indigenous groups continue to ask for land rights. However, our requests have not received sufficient responses thus far. And whenever we talk about forestry around the world, we tend to emphasize resources, but we are at a crisis. Science has already proved this. We need to make sure that we remember that we are at a crisis, and at the same time, we also need to remember that within indigenous groups, 80% of biodiversity is currently being preserved. This does not mean that we are simply safeguarding the biodiversity, but we are devoting our lives into protecting biodiversity. But this can be done even better if we work together. Quite sadly, the brothers and sisters of indigenous communities around the world are faced with racial discrimination, and many have died because of such discrimination. And many have also lost their lives due to preventable natural disasters. Concerning COVID-19, I have no choice but to talk about the same story. Our elderly, our women, our children are exposed to such dangers. Along these lines, we do respect Western science. We look up to Western science. But at the same time, the science of the indigenous communities and the knowledge of the indigenous people have been earned from the forest. We communicated with the forest, and we receive our food and medicine from the forest. And so we need to make sure that such knowledge is also respected. To the government of the Republic of Korea and to the FAO, I would like to emphasize that at this World Forestry Congress, we continue to need to raise our voices, and thank you very much for these opportunities to share our voice with you. Finding nature-based solutions are very important. The indigenous people, we are nature itself. Our rights and the rights of the earth are one and the same. Our local communities are directly connected with nature. The Seoul Forestry Declaration, we surely welcome the declaration. We are the direct victims of climate change. And it is a great opportunity for us to participate in this Congress with a sense of urgency. Thank you for adopting the declaration.
Thank you, Mr. Juan Carlos Jintao, for supporting this Seoul Declaration, our outcomes of the 15th World Forest Congress, and for conveying views on indigenous stewardship in forest sector. I think we have so many small holders in forest sectors. I believe their voices should not be ignored. So I'd like to invite the president of the Korea Forestry Successor Association, Mr. Choi Moo-yeol, to give his remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Choi Moo-yeol. I am chairperson of the Association of Descendants of Smallholders in the Forestry Sector in Korea. It is my great pleasure to be participating in the World Forestry Congress as a representative of smallholder groups. Korea has been successful in restoring its forests. And I like to mention that many smallholders have been critical in achieving this because they have been involved in voluntary activities to plant trees and managing the forests. And as of 2018, we estimate that there's more than 221 trillion won of value of forests. This means that there is a public value of more than 4 million won per person. Forests produce wood products. In addition, they help provide clean water and they offer restoration, entertainment, and other recreational purposes for citizens. In addition, forests have been recognized for their role in storing and preserving carbon. According to an FAO report in 2015, carbon sequestration by forest has been calculated and announced. I believe that government representatives and forest sector leaders have come together to create this declaration and the Congress outcomes. And I believe that these outcomes and declaration include very important recommendations for people in the forest sector. I would really have to focus on sustainable use of wood products. Wood has been the most ancient resources for humanity, and wood and timber products have been very useful in human civilization. In particular, wood is renewable resource. Therefore, utilizing wood is critical in responding to climate change and achieving sustainable development. As we all agree, wood has natural value, but it also has ecological and other value. And I hope that there will be exponential growth of the use of wood products around the world. But at the same time, we need to remember that we need to continue to put into practice various efforts on the ground. If we do not put into practice all these guidelines and recommendations, there will be no achievements. In Korea, 67% of its territory is covered by trees and forests. And in Korea, we have these forest sector that needs to be provided with more support. Representing smallholder groups and foresters, we need to be given more support and opportunities so that we can strengthen our capacity. And I hope that this Congress will provide us with new opportunities. First of all, there should be more support system and schemes for foresters. About 25% of forests are public forests. And in responding to carbon neutrality and to sustainably manage forests, I believe that the government has to implement new schemes to support foresters in the public woods. And by utilizing public woods, we will be able to help limit the temperature rise by 1.5 degrees Celsius. We believe that there should be more financial and physical support for the forestry sector, but they have not been included for tax benefits. I argue that various taxes, including acquisition taxes and transfer taxes, need to be exempted when foresters manage their forests for more than 8 years. Third, I believe we need to include a percentage of domestically sourced wood products rather than importing these products from overseas. We need to continue to expand the use of wood products, and to do so, we need to promote circular economy. Currently, the self-sufficiency of wood products in Korea is 16%, but we need to increase this to 25%. We need to reduce the use of steel and other non-renewable resources, but replace them with wood products. Fourth, we need to increase technology and sophistication in the forest sector. The population in the forest sector is aging, and there are high altitude mountains where it is very difficult for laborers to work. So we need to implement state-of-the-art technology and solutions so that these forest sector can increase value added. And I would also like to mention that we need to continue to promote young foresters, especially women and youth should be included in the forest sector. In order to promote female youth personnel in the forest sector, we need to provide tailored training and education program. For those high school graduates and college graduates, if they want to work in the forest sector, they need to be given more support and additional policy support. And there should be a nationwide promotion system so that female foresters can continue to develop their careers, and they should be encouraged to move to the faraway places to work in the mountains. Korea has become a successful country in terms of reforestation, but we have a low level of forest product utilization. Now we need to switch our attention, so we no longer need to just focus on preserving our forests, but we should utilize them in a sustainable manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Choi Mu-yeol, for your remarks and advocating for maximizing the public benefits of forest on behalf of the forestry sector. Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Georg Schirmbeck, the President of the German Forestry Council, on behalf of the private sector. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Dear international forestry community, ladies and gentlemen, I am Georg Schirmbeck, the President of the German Forestry Council, and thus the spokesman for 2 million forest owners, foresters, forestry workers, forestry universities, and many forestry training institutions. There are 16 million forest owners in Europe. Vast majority of them small forest owners. I am one of these small forest owners. Germany has a great tradition in forestry and timber management. In Germany and the world, we are releasing too much CO2. That is bad for our climate. Our forests bind CO2. We therefore need to plant young, diverse, climate-stable forests. When the trees are ready to be harvested, the wood must be processed into durable wood products. This takes CO2 out the atmosphere and at the same time avoids products that were harmful to the environment. Our forest scientists have proved that actively managed forests are better for biodiversity than dark rotting forests. We must not set aside forest land in developed countries while at the same time overexploring forests in developing countries. The hunger of the world's people is the enemy of our forests. We must conduct forestry on a forest science basis and not on ideology. 309 years ago, there was a man in Germany named Karlowitz. This man was concerned about the forest in his homeland, as the forests were in poor condition due to overexploitation. He had an idea to use only as much wood as grew back. Karlowitz was the inventor of sustainability 300 years ago because we wanted to build green, healthy, and resilient forests. This makes forestry to cradle of sensibility. Now we are standing here 309 years later, and the motto of this Congress is building green, healthy, resilient forests together. In the spirit of the forestry inventor of sustainability, the Congress and the talks of the last days have set a strong sign here. This sign, which my team and the members of the German Parliament are holding up, is made of wood from an oak tree and grew in Berlin. This oak grew in the spirit of sustainability almost 300 years ago. It has expired world wars, a divided city, and peace. In its wood we have graved for the forest in Korea. We have traveled here from Germany to talk together about forest science and to build green, healthy, resilient forests internationally. After this session, we gave this gift to the minister, the Berlin oak, we give to you. I thank the Korean government and all the organizations involved for holding this World Forestry Congress. Maybe we will see each other on a similar event soon in Europe, in Germany, in Berlin. I wish you peace and health and a little bit love. Thank you very much.
Thank you for representing the private sector and giving your remarks at this World Forestry Congress. I believe the Karlowitz's early idea of sustainable harvesting has led to today's concept of sustainability. Last but not least, I'd like to invite Amos Amanubo. He will give his remarks at the Youth Representatives for Stakeholders. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you very much. Dear esteemed dignitaries and participants of the 15th World Forestry Congress and stakeholders of the forest sector, you have heard many times the previous speakers mention about youth and youth and youth. To this end, I have the honor to present to you the call to action concerning the meaningful participation and inclusion of youth and young professionals in the forest sector. Following regional consultations across the world with over 700 youth and young professionals and youth-led organizations in the forest sector and land use-related sectors, the youth together have identified a number of key barriers that must be addressed to enhancing their potential and leveraging their contribution to building a sustainable future with forests. These challenges include, among others, limited career development programs and outdated academic programs for forest education, limited decent employment in the forest sector, which constrains the socio-economic integration of young people, of the young generations, limited access to financial opportunities, which also constrains the ability of youth to engage in forest-related entrepreneurship, research, and exchange. Last, but also very importantly, we identified limited gender mainstreaming and inclusion of youth voices in policy and decision-making processes. We, the youth, are committed to contributing to building a green, healthy, and resilient future with forests, capitalizing on our networks, exploring partnerships with the private and public sectors across local and global scales, academia, and the civic society to overcome the barriers to our meaningful engagement and contribution to the forest sector, including achieving the global forest goals, the UN Decade on Ecosystem Restoration, and progressive and meaningful national and private sector forest-related sustainable objectives. To achieve our vision and mission, we need concerted efforts from the public sector, the private sector, the academia, and non-governmental organizations within and beyond the forest sector. We, the youth, therefore invite these actors and all of you that are here today to work with us to ensure inclusive and equitable access to high-quality forest education and trainings for youth everywhere. This includes improving programs that prepare youth in technical knowledge, but also socioeconomic and global political economy perspectives on the forest sector. We also invite you to expand the number of scholarships available, particularly in developing countries, and enhance international support for implementing effective and targeted capacity building programs. And we invite you to improve and standardize technical vocational education and training opportunities for youth that combine on-the-job training and off-job learning. We invite you to work with us to ensure decent work and career development for the youth everywhere, including engaging with youth to better understand how the forest sector can be more appealing career option for the youth and create more decent jobs and career development and advancement opportunities. We invite you to work with us to increase investments and access to finance in small forestry businesses, including youth entrepreneurship and projects, and supporting the development of value chains in youth-led forest-related enterprises. We invite you to strengthen and enhance multi-sectoral collaborations between governments and the private sector and the academic sector to provide high-quality mentorship and apprenticeship opportunities to ensure a smooth entry into the workforce for youth. We invite you to work with us to achieve gender equality and empower all young women in the forest sector. This includes fostering multi-sectoral collaborations between governments and private sectors and the academia as well to promote gender-inclusive practices in recruitment and selection processes. Promote women's leadership at all levels of decision-making in the forest sector. And we invite you to foster multi-sectoral collaborations to promote training of female teams to work in the field, as well as training on non-tolerated behaviors and gender biases in the workplace in the forest sector. And lastly, we invite you to work with us to ensure the political participation and representation of youth and young professionals through improving the diversification of boards and advisory committees and task forces by actively seeking and inviting qualified youth on board. Depending on the context, to avoid the tokenization of youth participation, we invite you to also make youth part of the quorum in your decision-making committees and boards. And lastly, very importantly, we invite you to include youth in planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating outcomes of programs and projects that may impact youth. We, the youth, acknowledge the collaborative nature of these recommendations, and we invite the governments, international organizations, non-governmental organizations, and the academia and the private sector to provide an enabling environment for us to unlock our potential in the forest sector. We also recognize the role that the 15th World Forestry Congress has played in empowering and responding to the needs of the youth and young professionals, enabling them to showcase their contributions to the sector and to network and engage in mentorship. And we encourage today onwards all stakeholders in the forest sector to carry with the example that has been set here in this 15th World Forestry Congress. Before I leave this stage, I would like to acknowledge also my colleague who worked relentlessly to make sure that this comes to this stage. Erica Di Girolami, who is not here with us, who also worked on this youth declaration. And also, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude on behalf of all the youth that participated in the regional consultations and all the youth and young professionals that have joined us here in this 15th World Forestry Congress. Extend our gratitude to the Korean Forest Service and the government of Korea for having created the environment, the enabling environment for youth to participate and send out this monumental statement that they are capable and they want to contribute to building a sustainable future with forests. With all these, I say thank you, and we look forward to working together with you in building our future with forests. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Amos Amanubo, for your words and for reaffirming the importance of forest for the future generation on behalf of the youth. The outcomes of the 15th World Forestry Congress will now be announced. Forest-based solution must be inclusive of the perspectives of family farmers, smallholders, forest communities, indigenous peoples, women, and youth, and respectable of their rights, and they must empower them to participate equitably in decision-making and sustainable forest value chains. Participants of the 15th World Forestry Congress, if you stand behind what has been announced as the outcome of the Congress, please convey your thought in a way that may be known to all. Thank you. Thank you for your support. With the outstanding applause of the participants, I declare the adoption of the 15th World Forestry Congress outcomes. I'm very pleased that such meaningful outcomes have been adopted at the 15th World Forestry Congress. The Korea Forest Service and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations truly thank all participants from their respective countries for facilitating the adoption of the outcomes, and our gratitude goes out to everyone that has helped facilitate each event. I believe the outcomes will be spread widely and anticipate them to bridge key conference of parties such as UNCCD, CBD, UNFCCC, and others that will be held this year. The second half of the closing ceremony will commence immediately with the Jian Zhou as the moderator. Thank you very much.